everyone. Thank you for joining this meetup today. Thank you to our speakers, to all of us who have managed time really to out of the busy schedule to speak in this meetup today. Welcome on behalf of Cloud9 Community Channel meetup for the September edition. Um, just a quick intro about myself. I am Pradeep Kadal. I work for Argos UK, and I'm a Microsoft Azure MVP. Have been a certified trainer for almost a decade now, in the industry for almost 12 and a half years. Pretty much about me, I'm in Twitter as Pradeep Kadal, LinkedIn as Pradeep Kadal, of course. I'm certified as with Microsoft Azure as a Azure Solution Architect. That's pretty much about me. Today, since this is the sort of a very beginning of this Cloud9 Community Channel, I would be on behalf of the organizers, I would be speaking a bit about this community, a bit of quick intro, really not much, but just a quick one, and how being part of the community, you would you can engage in this over the months and year moving forward. Then a bit about Azure platform overview, about how the migration motions goes with when you adopt the cloud computing platforms like of Azure. Then we'll have from our speaker Adnan, we would have keep your cloud infrastructure secure the right way. Then the last but not the least, we'll have the cost optimization techniques or the smart ways to manage and optimize the costs in Azure. Looks like there's someone in the lobby, so let me also. Unfortunately, it's just me at the moment who would be able to approve, I believe. All right, so. Welcome to Tech Community. Welcome to the Microsoft Tech Community. Basically, we're really thankful to Microsoft because we have the support. We have always received support from Microsoft over the past decade in terms of whether it's a hybrid event or a physical on-prem event, or with the refreshments that you need to really run these meetups. To the platform as in meetup.com to host the event virtually, including the Microsoft Teams that I'm using today is thanks to Microsoft, really. But then quick intro to Cloud9 community. Nothing really different than any other community in the world. Basically, this community is basically a way, an exciting way to really connect with like-minded people in the cloud computing space, the IT professionals, the experts, a way for us to come together and share knowledge, gain industry insights, and so on. This community is more of a platform where we discuss, like I said, it's the cloud computing, security, and of course, we cannot deny the fact that AI is really all over, and we definitely want to discuss how AI is going to shape the world moving forward, and the standards, the compliance requirements. There's so many things with regards to AIs. Definitely, we want to just base on those areas as well moving forward. Obviously, this platform would be this would be a platform to discuss the best practices in the areas of our discussions, and regardless needless to mention that this community is open to anyone to join, anyone regardless of where you come in from, where what your ethnicity is, or what differences we have. It really doesn't matter to well-being in the community. It's just that we sort of have some basic guidelines to how you conduct in this community, which I would quickly touch base on. This community is the way we share the knowledge is, of course, through presentations, PowerPoint, slide decks, demonstrations, and also depending on what best works in the real time, depending on what the topic is as well. The standard norms, the standard guidelines, community guidelines. So if you are part of this community, we expect that we know who others are in the community as well. It's really important for us to be friendly, be patient to while listening or to get responses and all. Be welcoming, respectful to everyone you meet in the community. Be open to questions. Ask questions, open to all kinds of questions, and respect others' viewpoints. As in the meantime, um, obviously, we need to understand the differences that we have. We come from so much of diverse background, and as we are sort of representing this, we are a global citizen today. It really doesn't matter, like I said, where we come from, and and be kind. Yeah, like I said, it's really important for us to be kind and considerate to others in the community. So that's all we expect being part of the community. As I said, we're always thankful to Microsoft for the community support. However, at this point, we're also looking for other sponsors, supporters to support this community so that we have a larger the organizing team, the volunteering team, so that we can run more better, uh, and bigger events, possibly conferences in future as well. Right. So today we know what and who are presenting, but then we'll come to that. So I just wanted to touch base on some of the areas that I really was excited to discuss about. For instance, this if any one of you are new to the cloud computing, um, then definitely I'll touch base on what this thing is. What is cloud computing basically? Um, I believe if any one of you have any questions, please you can unmute yourself and then speak up. You can turn on your camera as well if you'd like to, and then we can also have a sort of a discussion-based session as well. I'm really open to that, and it really becomes more interesting when we do that. But then, like I said, cloud computing is not a new topic anymore. I mean, we are using cloud computing platform for over a decade. I mean, over not just over a decade, but almost for past 14 years, I believe. Or some of you might have also used it for past 16 years from the very beginning. Um, but it is basically about delivery of computing services over the internet, as I have mentioned in my slide. Uh, the basic IT infrastructure such as servers, storage, database, networking, and all of these really make up the IT infrastructure. And cloud computing is basically the way. It's a way to really consume this these infrastructure over the internet, right? But the most important part of cloud computing, the beauty of it is that it's available on demand. It's a self-service. Basically, the amount you need, the amount of IT infrastructure you need, uh, you just you can use the self-service platform, and you can just start consuming it. It's multi-tenancy. It's a public cloud. Um, I mean, definitely there are different deployment models, but then in the same cloud, you could have many customers sharing the resources. It runs on a shared model, highly scalable, of course. Like depending on, as I said, depending on your need, your requirement, you can easily scale from a very small IT infrastructure to really global scale, enterprise scale infrastructure. And the most important part is you pay for what you use. So for instance, you need some virtual machine, and you need a machine power or computing power, say a virtual machine. You spin up that virtual machine, start using it for some purpose, or for some test purpose, or for some development purpose, any purpose. And as soon as you are done, you you can just turn that off, deprovision that, and immediately you get the bill of what you have really used, rather than what you initially provisioned. So that's cloud computing. I definitely don't want to spend so much of time speaking of these uh, things, but quickly, as I said, it's cloud computing is basically about all of these computing power, storage, network, and the analytics, of course. And as you can see, that this is not just about Microsoft Azure, but there are other big cloud platforms providers such as GCP, Amazon Web Services, and so on. Consumption model, of course, there's no upfront cost. There's no need to purchase or manage costly infrastructure anymore with the use of this cloud computing platform. I think we have pretty much discussed about this. Um, there are certain cloud computing users patterns. For instance, there for instances you would like to run some applications, and you have already identified that there is some inactivity period, meaning there is no users at certain period of time. So based on that, if you really do not want to pay for that inactivity period, you can turn that cloud resource that you have created, and start using it as soon as you need it, really. So that's on and off. For instance, there are startups, or there are I mean, let's say you have an application that really went viral, and you feel like you're growing too fast. Then cloud computing platforms such as Microsoft Azure is the best platform to go about. um, as I said, you can easily scale up and scale down as you need it. For unpredictable or predictable scenarios where you know that your computing resource is going to be at maximum during this period of time and would be minimum at that period of time, you can consider using cloud computing platforms like of Azure. So that's the cloud computing uses pattern. Now, the reason why I added this cloud migration and modernization triggers here is pretty much because uh, today it's all about, if you have not moved to Azure, for instance, this is high time that to move. Basically, there are some triggers. For instance, if your data center is expiring, the contracts are expiring, or if the demand is that the applications needs to be used remotely, for instance, or you would like to go reach the market faster than ever. You have a deadline to meet, you have some specific timeline to reach to the market. There are all of these triggers. There are, like, the cyber threats have been like never before high, and um, you would like to, rather than pay upfront, rather than invest on your capital upfront, you would like to go on the operational expenses. Then definitely it's a high time to move to the cloud, and modernize, of course. Going beyond that, um, before, like, moving forward, just quickly touching base on these topics as well, such as the cloud model, cloud deployment models. Uh, so that's public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud, of course. So public cloud as in um, hybrid cloud, or private cloud. So when you have a private cloud, what happens is you create that cloud pretty much on your own environment, or um, or on your own data center. So that you have complete control over the data and resources. But when it comes to the public cloud way of deployment, you can consider using the public cloud, such as Azure, of course, to really um, provision resources, and um, and only pay for what you use. Hybrid cloud is when basically you want the mix of both your on-prem or your private cloud resources, plus the power of the public cloud, such as, let's say, um, um, the latest innovations in AI, or machine learning, or the other innovations with respect to the applications that's in the marketplace. Uh, hybrid is definitely strategy. There are these cloud service models, IaaS, PaaS, SaaS. Um, just to quickly run through this, IaaS is so you have your on-premise environment, which is which you can also consider it as a private cloud, where you manage all of your IT resources, right from your storage, network, computing resources to the applications and the data. But then when it comes to infrastructure as a service, basically you only manage you only manage the virtual machine on top of what your provider, your cloud provider provides, because your cloud provider is responsible to sort of manage the computing environment, storage, networking, all of that, and basically you control the virtual machine or the operating systems, and including the data and applications. And moving forward to the platform as a service, as a platform as a service, you only manage, you worry about your applications and the runtime, like as in um, suppose if you are a developer, then you basically uh, you don't really have to buy the platform where you can oh, I mean, you don't have to really have a virtual machine or a physical machine, but basically you can run your code on these services, which is called PaaS services. Uh, but when it comes to software as a service, it's sort of ready-made applications such as Office 65 or a Dynamics 365, CRM, ERP, those cloud-based applications. You basically play around with your own data and access controls. You don't really uh, care about managing the infrastructure that's behind the scene. So with Microsoft's 100 plus data centers, 60 plus Azure regions, uh, it's a huge cloud infrastructure being used by over 95% of the Fortune 500 companies around the world. So definitely it's a strong, big platform, and it's not just about the data center infrastructure, the infrastructure as a service, but it basically provides all sorts of the PaaS applications to the software as a service based applications, which actually includes Dynamics 365, GitHub, to Office 365 in terms of SaaS applications, to platform as a service applications for the developers, uh, to the all of the services that supports the hybrid integrations, basically connecting your on-prem services to the public cloud, and obviously the security and management aspects, which includes likes of Azure AD, Azure AD B2C, MFA, and so on and so forth. Obviously, the customers' needs today are changing. So there, as we know, that there are like hundreds and thousands of applications running on customers' environments today. These are really diverse across across multi-cloud environments. For instance, one company really does not just use Azure or on-prem today. They are multi-cloud. They are uh, hybrid, everything. So um, to support hybrid infrastructure, Azure really provides the platforms such as Azure Stack, for instance, which is almost like running Azure in your private cloud. So basically, you spin up Azure Stack platform on your servers, on-prem servers, and then it seamlessly connects to your public cloud resources. And for that purpose, there is something called Azure Arc. Azure Arc is basically something that provides that gives you this single control pan, and puts sort of puts probes on the on Azure Stack to other on-prem servers, no, but not just on-prem servers, but other public cloud servers and applications as well, in terms of the manageability and monitoring capabilities. Something I also wanted to touch base on while I'm on this was on the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure. So if you are really considering moving to Azure to cloud, then definitely Microsoft has a standard set of guidelines, which is also called Cloud Adoption Framework, which really has different methodologies based on the step or based on where you are in terms of your cloud state within your company. For instance, you are really want to strategize on like uh, create a business case on why you would like to really move to Azure, why not on-prem, or why not to others, then you can start with the defined strategy. There are a set of guidelines, the frameworks that you can use to really come up with your business justifications and to make sure that this specific project is prioritized. And then on the next step is on the cloud adoption framework is plan where really um, you get to create a sort of a team alignment from from within your organizations to your customer organizations in terms of your skill readiness, in terms of the customer's skills readiness to adopt in terms of the adopting the cloud, adopting Azure. On the next step would be to set up the first landing zone, for instance, to try out, to help to really start creating, moving one or two to on-prem servers to Microsoft Azure virtual machines, and then setting up the basic subscriptions on how the subscriptions to be set up, how whether it's to what to I mean in terms of setting up the hub and spoke um, model within the first landing zone that you create, and then the next step would be to expand on top of that and apply some basic best practices. And then obviously on the next step would be to start with the first workload migrations, and then really in each of these methodologies there are guides that you can really use um, uh, and speed up your journey to the cloud um, with ease, basically. And then eventually, once you have made the migrations to the cloud, then the next step would be to really manage the operations, IT operations, the dev operations, and then apply the all the governance and compliance or the security best practices. For all of these reasons, Microsoft has already made really good created these guides after having a lot of several rounds of consultations with the customers and the likes of customers, as well as the Microsoft partners around the world. So it's really helpful considering using a cloud adoption framework for Azure if you're really considering moving to Azure in the near future. This is um, another graphics that really explains how the migration journey is going to be like. Um, I wouldn't considering the time and considering the complexity of this and at this time I would not really go into the details of this, but this is basically based on to give you a highlight of what it is. This is basically based this is a cloud journey based on the cloud adoption framework, where at what point you engage with, for instance, a Microsoft Azure partner, Microsoft partner, or how you are going to really start the initial assessment, at what point you create the business case, at what point you start sort of preparing for your for the migration of the pilot applications or the VMs after you have really identified them, and then your financial analysis, your project manager resources, who are going to be part of the migrations team, or what is the migration plan like, and the more specific or the nitty gritty on the migration um, steps, building the team in terms of the skills readiness, designing the Azure subscriptions as like I mentioned previously, designing your first landing zone, applying some of the security and compliance controls in terms of the governance, identity, cost management, and so on and so forth. Basically, this is what we do, and this is really unique to each customer. It really does not have to be the same for one customer because, uh, like I said, you know where you are in terms of your cloud journey. So it's you who should really work with a partner to Azure partner or Microsoft partner to identify what steps or you would like to take up really. So with this, obviously, it all starts with discovery and assessment. The call to actions for me at this point, I would like to mention is obviously start exploring Azure platform. Start with, if you have not yet started, then just go with AC 900 certifications. This is the fundamental certifications that gives you uh, the opportunity to understand the cloud computing as a platform, and then to understand the basics of Microsoft Azure platform, and go beyond from there. Ensure that you have access to your Azure subscriptions. Microsoft provides this trial subscription which you can really sign up immediately. If you find any issues in that, you can just always reach out to people like me, or we have other resource persons here in the call today. Um, or obviously keep engaging with the local tech communities around you. Yeah, with this, thanks a lot for listening to my presentation so far. It's 6 p.m., so I would probably want to move to the next sessions. And the next session is with my friend Adnan Hendricks. If Adnan would like to speak, I mean, let Adnan really speak of what he would like to speak today, what he has in store for us today. So with this, welcome Adnan, and the stage is all yours.
Hi, Pradeep. Thanks for inviting me to do my session with you. Let me just
You're
share
welcome.
my
Yep.
screen. So once again, thanks for that nice introduction. My name is Adnan Hendricks. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and I've been doing Microsoft technologies for the past 30 plus years. So I basically focus on security, Azure, Microsoft 365, and rugby is my sport. For those of you on social media and online, can follow me with my handle at MicroSpecialist. And like I said, I love presenting and doing sessions on cloud and security. So this session is really about what you should be doing, maybe start doing, and also what you should be looking at getting into when it comes to cloud security. So the agenda for my session is all about looking at some of the cyber threats and then some basic security operations hygiene, followed by GRC, so some governance, risk, and compliance, how we can deal with that in our cloud subscription or Azure subscription, look at certain things that's new in cloud security, and then also leave you guys with a review of some homework. Now, the nice thing is, if you've been working in IT for as long as I have, you've seen a lot of things come and go. And what's really awesome about working in the digital age right now is that we have artificial intelligence, we got cloud computing, we have robots that are jumping around, um, like the Boston Dynamics robot that can also physically do the same things that we humans can, like evaluate data and objects based on sight, sound, and also act on that data. So things like AI, um, things can also clone your um, face, voice, etc. So that's the scary part of artificial intelligence. So with more smart technology, somehow we as humans always seems to be the weakest link. Like I like to show this picture. You can have the most modern technology and security controls, but still at the end of the day, there's going to be some human being doing the operating. And quite often, we as humans make mistakes. So a large portion of my session is also to show you how you can go and protect yourself from making those security mistakes. For example, we all know how easy it is that within a few minutes you can have a website up and running in Azure, a virtual machine up and running in Azure, but sometimes you don't have the right security controls attached to those resources. So we sometimes get lost in the complexity of security compliance when setting up infrastructure. And attackers, they are, utilizing those flaws, and it's really our responsibility to protect ourselves and our clients from themselves, from making those mistakes. So I like to refer to it as sprinkler system security. Much like, if a fire breaks out in a building, you don't have to have a copy of the whole building. So with sprinkler systems, you ensure that if in a room there's a fire, the fire gets put out within that room. So in that same way, when it comes to cloud security, we want to contain that breach and be notified as soon as possible so we can react on that threat. So a large problem, and this is something that's happening quite often these days with social engineering. You must have heard about deep fakes utilizing AI with things like um, a person's likeness. So hackers can portray a video with your voice. And this is a real life example that happened somewhere in the UK where somebody got scammed out of £18,000, where a scammer basically phoned the person, told them to go to a website that they're phoning from the bank, and there's some sort of problem, and they convinced the person through getting a notification on their security controls that they were from the bank, which ideally they weren't. And the thing is, people trusted that control. And unfortunately, that's how, this person was taken advantage of. Quite often, I'm sure there's lots of these kind of breaches that are almost daily in the news. So very so often data gets stolen. Even Dell had multiple data breaches just recently. And in the UK, cyber research for law firms found that millions of passwords on the dark web are just available. So quite often, you know, it's not so much about hacking if your data is already available um, on the internet. The security adoption framework, basically, the slide is really just a framework of how you can go about to get closer to a zero trust approach. Because quite often you have on the business side where people want to do the job securely, they want to have or minimize security incidents, want to be able to protect business assets, and also be compliant with certain regulations. And then on the strategic side, with the technology, it can be applied by having security hygiene, backups, patching of software, ensuring that you have your identities and access controls, and a number of different security operations that can help you improve the data security, applying governance, risk, and compliance (GRC), and also on other uh, different IoT security, etc. This is really just to show the attack timeline of a hack. And ideally, you have two kinds of security controls. You have what I refer to as being before bang and after bang. So quite often you have certain controls that try to keep hackers out, so before the hack, and then you have certain controls that really come into effect after you've already been compromised and the hacker are trying to either change or manipulate existing accounts or trying to install something on a computer. So ideally, you want to have security detection that applies on both sides of the attack. And the way we can quite easily uh, apply this is by focusing on the zero trust approach. And like I said, it's not always hacking if I bought your credentials. And there's lots of tools, including an ISO you can download, that will just give you the tools to hack away. So you really need to enable cloud protection services. For example, exploit kits, 0 days, ransomware can be purchased on internet. So the focus should really be on hygiene. So what you can do, apply the certain controls you can apply, and also then to try and focus on MFA. Remember, needing more than just your username and password to log into specific systems, or utilizing things like passwordless signing. And then we also have things like denial of service, which can be uh, mitigated through DDoS protection, for example. So getting back to what zero trust principle is to always verify, use least privilege, and assume breach. So the whole idea is that whenever it comes to technology, you want to verify that the person is who they say they is when they're signing in, and we can look at how certain controls we set up in Entra can apply zero trust principle to those actions. So in a way, organizations can prevent attacks through these specific controls, like utilizing more than just a username and a password. So multi-factor authentication, where multiple factors need to be applied. So think about your um, authentication app on your phone, or getting a code sent or to your email, applying frequent security patches, and also having a secure patch management process, and applying the same zero trust principles across your entire infrastructure. So looking at the identity side, your endpoints, your computers and laptops that people use, the different kinds of applications, network, and also uh, data we can apply a zero trust approach. So when saying that, conditional access is the security tool or function in which you can start your zero trust journey by protecting your identities. And conditional access, we can secure Microsoft Entra, because the most important part of your infrastructure are the identities. So we can use Microsoft Entra conditional access, where we can apply which identities and specific controls. For example, when they're trying to sign in, we can enforce that they always have to utilize multi-factor authentication. Depending on the application, we can request extra controls or apply extra controls during that sign-in. So we can have secure access to um, internal applications and help users to securely connect to their work resources from anywhere. So in this way, we can block identity attacks, ensure things that are utilized through least privilege access, and generally try and improve the user experience by utilizing some of the Entra workloads. And I just want to jump over to my demo environment. So here I'm going to jump to my tenant, and I'm currently signing into my Microsoft Entra Admin Center. So this is one of my demo environments. And one of the ways in which we can go and apply that zero trust is to enforce the conditional access by enabling specific conditional access policies. So like I said, this is just a demo environment. You can go and create a policy from a template. So there's a number of specific policies that you can go and apply. For example, like always requiring your users to have or use a multi-factor authentication. So I can select that specific policy, and this is the settings. So it has my policy name and the policy state, whether it's enabled, off, or currently active in a report-only mode. The name and requirements is that it will require users to use multi-factor authentication. So including all users, excluded all my cloud applications, and then the access control is that it will grant access once requiring multi-factor. So I'm just going to click on create. It will go and create that policy. And if we go and look at that policy in my conditional access, you can see that it has the assign to all users included, all cloud apps, and the grant access is selected. Now here I can also enable extra controls or extra requirements when they try to sign in. So it will grant access if this factor is applied. So if the user does the multi-factor authentication, I can also enable extra, so requiring that the device the user uses is also compliant, that it needs to be a hybrid join device, etc. And I can have either one of the selected or all of the selected controls applied. And then I can enable my policy, save it, and the user will get that enabled. One of the policies that we have to enable as administrators right now is by utilizing phish resistant or enforcing phish resistant MFA, because MFA can be compromised. So phish resistant utilizes like a YubiKey that will enable the hardware identifier to be used. And you can see that one of the extra controls is the authentication strength of phish resistant MFA, such as a FIDO2 security key. And once again, I can enable it, and every time an administrator tries to access um, the Azure portal or sign into my infrastructure, he needs to use the phish resistant or YubiKey to sign in. So I'm just going to go back to my session. It was a quick demo. Showing conditional access. Jumping back to the session. So we showed that conditional access can be used whenever somebody tries to sign in. And those were just to use sign-ins to the network or utilizing a cloud application. Microsoft has new features that we can use conditional access to control things like network connections, um, internet access, and also what's called intra-private access through a process or functionality called global secure access. It's where we can use um, conditional access policies to protect network access and applications in the organization's applications and access. This in conjunction with a client that needs to be installed on the endpoint, and whenever a user tries to access a specific application that's made available through a global secure access, conditional access will be applied to ensure that we verify explicitly the identities, the endpoints, and also the remote networks that the person is utilizing. Because we might not want to enable it through um, specific Wi-Fi connections, for example. So with zero trust, we can apply the conditional access. One of the built-in features and functionality of Microsoft Azure is that it provides Azure confidential computing. So platform protection by protecting data, whether it's at rest, in transit, or in use. So once again, utilizing encryption, data is always protected from insider threats. For example, like I mentioned, you have before a hack and after a hack. So you might have employees that are trying to exfiltrate data. Quite often, in something common, unfortunately, in insurance companies, internal or employees try to make copies of the company data and resell those to third parties or utilize it at another company um, competing with them. So having that data encryption is handy. Backups also important when having
Excuse
any
me,
infrastructure. Excuse me?
one questions regarding the
Yeah.
access through the internet.
Yes.
Suppose most of the time we are using the all the developers are using the remote access, right?
Yes.
So how can one because we do have a public IP.
Yes.
In the we don't have any private since we are out of the organizations and working remotely. We have a public Wi-Fi. So how can we protect in such scenario using the in the Azure?
You are um, well, the applications, it works similar to VPN in a way in which the connection is really set up through the secure access client. So instead of utilizing, um, let's say, public Wi-Fi connection, it will try to set up a connection through the secure access client and the secure access connection. And in that way,
You mean
access to that, let's say, public IP or connection or application behind that IP, it will only allow connections that are utilizing that client that's been approved. So like the utilizing the user, the connection set up in the client. And in that way, a combination of those controls need to be, um, the right settings. And then the endpoint or the user will have access. So it doesn't just because it's the right user trying to access on maybe or the right identity trying to access something through a public IP or application that's just using a private device, for example, that doesn't have the secure client. So in that way, any connection is checked through the different controls. So even if it is the right identity, it's still not utilizing the secure access client. So I hope that clears it up a bit. Otherwise, we can always
you mean
get back and we can do a session on this if you have more questions, like after the session.
okay, sure.
Okay.
Okay.
So okay. So getting back to the session, we know how important backups are. Backups should always be um, off-site, one-way, and immutable. An extra control to protect backups is by utilizing multi-user authorization by making use of a resource guard. And a resource guard is really by having your backups protected by having a specific resource called a resource guard set up in a different tenant to protect um, your backup vault from access or accounts that might have write access or trying to make write changes to your backup vault and having an extra control that will check if the backup admin has access to the resource guard. And then the security admin needs to approve that connection before any changes are made to the backups. So it's really just having that extra step of protection between a backup vault and an admin account that might have direct access already to a specific backup vault. To just quickly show you how that pretty much looks like in the approval flow. So like let's say a backup admin needs to already has needs to have create a critical operation, write access or to delete something in a backup vault. That action won't immediately automatically go through. The resource guard will send the security admin a request, and the security admin will have to grant permission to the backup admin on the resource guard so that that critical operation can be approved. So there's always an extra step in between the action and the vault. And this is just another way to secure backups that might be stored into a backup vault in a specific tenant. One of the most important controls we can utilize is by making use of Azure policy. So we can block misconfigurations or vulnerabilities. We can harden systems, apply security baselines, and also enforce specific compliance by using Azure policy. And I just want to jump to my demo environment again. This time I'm signing into my Azure subscription. So this is another one of my demo environments. So we all know how quickly you can go and create something like a virtual machine or a specific resource or database or any other resource in Azure. And that's also the whole point with cloud computing. We can use templates, we can use the portal and just try and deploy a resource. For example, like this virtual machine that I have running. And this is just one of the demo virtual machines that I've enabled. And you can see that it has a public IP address, so I can access that. Now, normally you wouldn't want to create virtual machines with them having public IP addresses because it's not safe. Anything with a public IP, it's can be accessed from where I'm based in the Netherlands to UK to Russia, China, all over the world. So quite often we want to ensure that whenever something gets created, that it doesn't have a public IP address or it's deployed in a network that has at least a firewall and certain security appliances. So to prevent unauthorized access through the network, right? So with Azure policy is one of the ways in which I can restrict. Remember what I said in the beginning? We can protect people by protecting them from themselves to ensure that they don't make mistakes. So one of the things we can do is by creating that sort of control by utilizing um, Azure policy. So there's already a number of different um, definitions that are applied in my subscription and also definitions that you can use. For example, one of the definitions that I'm going to be use is listed. Let me just re-sign it. Network interfaces should not have public IPs because it's a security risk. So this is a built-in definition, policy definition that I can go and apply within my environment. So I can just assign this policy, and the scope is really the position where I want to have this applied. So I can have a tenant or specific organization set up or apply the scope to a specific subscription and also a specific resource group. And then I can just click on next, and I can just go and set up a non-compliance message. One of the things in the beginning when Azure policy was new and also whenever we had specific policies applied that denied specific resources, the messages weren't that informal or informational. So one of the things that they really applied is where you could input your own personal custom messages just so that the operator that's trying to create this resource gets good information. So public IP not allowed by order none. And I can just next, check that my settings are the way I need it to be and click on create. So if I go to virtual machines and I try to create a virtual machine with public IP, just going to call it test VM2. I don't need any infrastructure redundancy. Some of the defaults I need to apply is name and password. My top secret password. And then I can just click on review and create. As you can see, public inbound ports. So what it's going to do, it's going to take the settings that I'm trying to do, and it's going to try and validate that according to the controls that I've already set up. And as you can see, it shows validation failed, and I have to see what it says. And it says, well, this resource creation was disallowed by policy. It gives me the name of the policy that's been applied and also the reason. So public IP, exactly what I input, and also the different settings that's set. So now I know on this specific resource group, I can go and create something in a different resource group, and a public IP might be allowed. But generally, these are the kind of things that you want to enable. So just another view looking at the raw data, you can see that policy violation and also the message information. So utilizing Azure Policy, we can apply those specific controls and protect our IT operations from making mistakes. And this could be from public IPs to deploying things that you might not want to have deployed in a specific subscription, for example. And so let me just go back to my presentation. So just because you're trying to protect the cloud doesn't mean that you don't have to apply certain basics. For example, things like utilizing specific workstations or secure access workstations to access important resources, thinking of don't allow personal devices because you don't know what somebody does, which websites they're browsing, for example, what the security controls are on their private devices. You want to have devices that you know are secure on specific networks, not accessible through um, public Wi-Fi connections or networks, and you want to have specific protected uh, domains with separate admins for different cloud resources or subscriptions, and also utilizing privileged identity management for your cloud access, and also the general basics with least privilege. Remember, zero trust, assume breach, least privilege, and always verify. You want to ensure that you use role-based access control. So not that somebody has um, global administrator access, but maybe just virtual machine access or virtual network administration access to create that specific resource when required. So another friendly reminder that, you know, sometimes a lot of hacks are published on internet and things are sold on the dark web. So I've already mentioned MFA through to control access, through conditional access, utilizing passwords. It can be an SMS authenticator app or on your phone or utilizing a YubiKey. Microsoft also allows MFA with Entra ID, where you can bring your own um, external authentication methods to provide that. And these are some of the vendors that allows you to have that. So with feature-resistant MFA, I've already mentioned the FIDO2 YubiKeys, but there's also the new utilization of passkeys. Passkeys for consumer accounts are also available, because this is the future past passwordless. So you don't need a FIDO key. You can just use your authenticator app in conjunction with another password manager on your phone, because not everybody has a YubiKey. Most people have phones. So with um, latest phones and software like iOS 17, you are allowed to make use of your phone as a passkey. So the hardware identifier in this case is really the hardware identifier of the device itself. And in a way, to set it up, when setting up uh, enabling passkeys, for example, on Microsoft accounts, you can set it up by utilizing Authenticator app, um, passwordless, or signing with the Apple ID utilizing a passkey. For iOS, it does require, like I mentioned, iOS 17. And then this is just the authenticator flow of how you would be able to sign in with the passkey in your authenticator app or secondary password manager. So how you enable passkeys in the enterprise is by enabling the authentication strength. So utilizing uh, passkeys, so adding a new authentication strength. I've already mentioned the phish-resistant MFA with passkeys or FIDO keys. So you can just enable it through the authentication methods, authentication strengths. Pradeep mentioned creating infrastructure such as virtual machines. So one of the important ways of protecting your environment is by blocking um, low-level accounts, like from browsing, scanning, or preventing PowerShell. And this is just a link to a GitHub, how you can have the free tooling to prevent that within your environment as an extra. And because with having access to your remote virtual machines running in an Azure environment, you're always using RDP. Quite often we refer to it, instead of using remote access, as ransomware deployment protocol. With these, you can go and use specific web accounts and utilize MFA on RDP servers that you're trying to access on Azure by enforcing the user authentication that you have in your remote desktop connection settings. With Azure, you can use a more cloud-based holistic approach built into the platform by utilizing Microsoft Defender for Cloud. It will apply controls that you can specify to your Azure environment. And just to quickly jump to my demo environment again. So Microsoft Defender for Cloud, I'm just going to click on OK so that doesn't get saved. It's really a smart, intelligent tool that runs a number of security policies and applies that to all your infrastructure that's currently running. And what it will do is, depending on the number and specific subscriptions that you apply it on, it will give you a number of recommendations. So these policies and controls and checks are being constantly applied to your resources running in your environment. So luckily for me, I don't have any critical recommendations or high. They are mostly medium. And the nice thing about Defender for Cloud, it takes away the guesswork of really applying security to specific resources. For example, you might still be on your learning journey with Microsoft Azure. So you might know how to create a virtual machine, but you might not know how to secure it. So in your demo environment, you can go and try and play around. And then you go into Defender for Cloud and you look at the recommendations that it gives you. So it will give you advice, for example, based on the risk level. So obviously, high is bad, critical is really bad, and medium. So if we look at some of the mediums, for example, storage accounts should prevent shared access keys, public access should be disallowed, and then I can filter and drill down into that and look at really what the problem is, if there are any attack vectors being applied, and how I can fix it. So luckily, some of these have a fix button, or to prevent access, I can follow the advice that it gives me and go and secure my resource in Azure. In the same way, I can assign this to somebody else. So I can delegate it to a colleague, for example, or maybe trigger Logic app to go and do the change for me or remediate that. So this is a good way of looking at the recommendations and just increasing that security controls. In the same way, depending on the number of compliance standards you might have, you can look at your regulatory compliance, and you can enforce specific controls and have a look at what the regulatory compliance should be based on the workloads that I have. In the same way, I can go and add more compliancy. For example, I can go to my subscription and look at the security policies that I have applied. So here you can see that I have the Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark. So it's really just the Microsoft recommendations based on the resources. It will go and tell me, hey, this is what you need to do to beef up your security. And what I've done is also enabled the UK official and UK NHS security compliance controls on my subscription. So they have 51 recommendations that will be controlled on my different resources. In the same way, I might want to see the or apply a different security compliance standard. For example, like ISO 27001 or NIST compliancy or some other HIPAA or PCI DSS or FedRAMP controls. And all these checks will be done on my resources. I can enable it, and then it will be um, controlled based on those security requirements from that compliancy standards. So these are quite simple ways in which you can go and utilize specific industry standards and just immediately apply it. And all you need to do is just follow the advice, look at what resources changes you need to do to ensure that the security is set to that standard. So you can get all your audit reports approved. So that's really just quickly something that I wanted to show with Defender for Cloud. We can always have another session because I can talk for hours on just that specific portion. So with that, we're living in the AI generation, and luckily for us, Microsoft has a bunch of co-pilots that's already defined. For those of you that might be new to Copilot, Microsoft Copilot is really a generative artificial intelligence that's based off or artificial intelligence chatbot that runs on Microsoft Azure that applies to Microsoft 365. You can have Copilot that's specific to security, and also you can go and create your own custom Copilot to utilize the artificial intelligence that Microsoft based through Copilot Studio. So it's a way you can basically prompt, use prompting or ask questions to the Copilot based on security scenarios. So you can do incident response, security reporting, and also just look at your security posture management. And this takes away a lot of the technical know-how that you might need to operate your cloud environment by just talking or um, asking questions to your Copilot for security. In the same way, there's an Azure Copilot that's specific to Microsoft Azure that you can ask questions um, in the portal. You'll see the Copilot button that I have, and you can just ask the questions how to create resources, for example. Basically, everything in Azure, it will give you advice on uh, that specific questions you have. So the goal with Security Copilot is specific for use cases across the security landscape of your Azure environment, identity management, things that has to do with your compliancy and more, and also specific SOC use cases. So Security Copilot basically lives in your Azure tenant, and you can set it up through securitycopilot.microsoft.com or from within the Azure portal. And the nice thing about this is that you can go and utilize prompt books and prompting that's made up of a number of different questions or prompts. For example, in this example is my question, how do I create a policy that blocks users from using any removable storage devices on Windows 11? Remember, this can utilize all the Defender products, Defender for Cloud, get input from endpoint protection and other Microsoft security, such as Sentinel and also identity security controls. So it will give the answer and also the steps to create that policy and apply the references. I can also analyze incidents. For example, um, show me a specific alert or device that has specific incidents, and it will go and give a explanation on what the security situation is about. A nice graph to show the attack vectors and timelines, and also where it's getting that information. For example, showing the source as Microsoft Sentinel, and then I can ask further and drill further into maybe showing what identities have been utilized on that workstation, for example, and also if that identity has signed in on other workstations, for example. In this example, security controls asking for suspicious logins that users might have done in a 10-day period before the alert to do uh, a find where that account has been involved in more workstations or uh, failed logins. And then I can drill down further, and you can see that it gives the different source of Microsoft Defender, for example, and also alert on compromised accounts and summarize. So getting a lot of specific detail that before you had to have technical know-how and knowledge of Microsoft Defender. In this way, you can use normal language and basically just ask specific questions and do threat hunting in this way. And the same way, in case you need to go and do a threat report, create a PowerPoint, or specific intelligence report, you can just tell the security copilot to go and create a PowerPoint for you with the information that it has gathered, so you can uh, use that in a meeting. So this nice thing with AI, Microsoft's Copilot integrations, is that it really couples in with all Microsoft products that has to do with security. Think of Microsoft Sentinel, Microsoft Defender, your endpoint manager, Microsoft Intune, that really can apply and manage the endpoints. So there's quite a large number of integrations where you can pull signals from and gather information. And that's really my session. So I want to leave you with some review or homework, because sometimes working in cloud and security can seem like you're free falling, depending on the day. If you just got into the office and there's some sort of incident or certain problems that you need to sort out. So MFA, it's not enough. Look at utilizing fish resistant MFA like FIDO keys or enabling pass keys. Always use more intelligent security software, Defender for Cloud or XDR. Assume breach and least privilege by enabling RBAC and utilizing identity protection controls. Always maintain your backups. Just making a backup is not enough. Always ensure that those backups can be actually used and utilized to restore a specific resource or um, workload. And then, of course, utilizing extra security above what I've mentioned, such as the built-in encryption, data protection, things of purview. With artificial intelligence, most people, we need to go and objectify our data so that with artificial intelligence, we can apply labels and specific security to data objects. Same way for data leakage prevention. Big tip, always review your architecture and work processes, because things change, right? There's always going to be like new ways in doing things and better ways to secure your environment or to create resources, and always evaluate new security possibilities, because we never know what's going to happen. So there's no person that can say, well, that's what you need to do. There's always some sort of unknown when dealing with security. And I just like to leave you with extra information, the security resources as takeaway. So the security adoption framework can be accessed at aka.ms SAF. And there's a lot of these extra things that you guys will have access with slide deck that will be provided. So these are just some of the resources that I use almost daily to ensure that I also keep my information up to date and know what I need to do. For those of you important with compliance controls, some of the industry references and resources, we utilize NIST, CISA, CIS, also a very important one, where you can get specific security benchmarks, and also from the open group, just a lot of information and different perspectives on zero trust. And with that, I'd like to thank you for joining the session. My name is Adnan Hendricks, once again, Micro Specialist Consulting, and just find me on the internet at Micro Specialist. Thank you. Back to Pradeep.
Thank you, Adnan. This was enlightening presentations from you, as always. Uh,
You're
and with
welcome.
this,
And thanks again for the invite.
you're most welcome, Adnan. Yeah, and we look forward to having you in the future as well. Yeah, and with this, let's move forward with the final presentation, the last but not the least one, with Sean Wilkinson. The stage is all yours, Sean. Welcome.
Thank you very much. So, before I actually make a start on any of this, can you all see my presentation? I've never tried this before, so
Yep, I can see
all good?
you. Yeah,
Cool.
all good.
Right. So, I will try not to take up too much of your time this evening. My name is Sean Wilkinson. I'm a cloud administrator at a company called Redstore based in the UK. Now, my specialty is Azure, but I also deal with kind of G-Cloud and to a very lesser degree AWS. Certainly, I wouldn't classify myself as being particularly good at them, but it is part of my role. To the side of that, I write for the Sysadmin Central blog, which is a personal project that I've been working on for God knows five or so years. Basically, again, focusing around Microsoft technologies. So I will try to get through this at a relatively decent pace because it is a Friday after all. I'm sure we've all got places we'd like to be. So what I plan to cover in my session today is managing your Azure costs smarter. Now, primarily this is going to be aimed at using everything that the cost analysis portal within Azure offers, because I think what quite often happens is that people use the cost analysis, they'll check the costs for the past month and things, but then otherwise it's just quite often overlooked, which is a bit of a shame because it's actually got some quite powerful features built into it that can make our lives significantly easier and stop us having to do some of these repetitive tasks that I know I've done in the past and I'm sure others do as well. Somewhat counterintuitively, I will be avoiding really discussing any sort of actual figures. I'm more interested in the reporting and all the kind of interesting features that can reduce that sort of need for us to do things. Now, I will continue in a moment, but specifically what I'll be covering in this is the cost analysis and the views, and basically how to use them to kind of quickly drill down to what you want to see. The cost anomaly reporting, which is a really cool tool that analyzes your historical costs and that can kind of alert you to potentially significant changes before they can become a problem. Because what I've quite often found again is that it's very easy to spot issues at the end of the month when the bill is due, but that's a little bit too late for you to really do much. Ideally, we want to capture these things as they're happening, reduce any potential impact from that, and by extension, reduce our costs. I'll also be looking at budgets, which I'm not going to lie about, do sound rather boring, but they are actually quite a useful reporting tool in Azure, especially if you empower your users to create and maintain their own, rather than trying to always delegate or kind of manage your users. I'll be looking at the advisor recommendations, which is basically an automated cost-saving identification tool that can very quickly allow you to see where you may be able to find some potentially significant cost savings. Again, it's a tool that I use all the time, and it really is quite brilliant, even though there are a few limitations around it at the moment. I'll be looking at reservations, which I know a lot of us are probably familiar with, so I won't cover what that is yet, and saving plans, which are also just a great tool. They're basically something that will allow you to save in all your compute costs across your entire Azure estate, and it just kind of does the job well. So basically, what I want to do by the end of this presentation is show you a load of different ways to manage basically your Azure costs using the free tools that are available in the portal. And basically the goal is let's work smarter, not harder. Basically, if we're doing our job well, it shouldn't be that difficult in my view. So let's go through. So I'm going to start at first principles here. So forgive me if the start of this is a little bit slow, but it's worth covering these things before we progress through. Now, this is the kind of overview for the cost management and billing center in Azure. You can reach this by just doing a search for it. Otherwise, it seems to appear all over the place. Now, this is where you can see any outstanding invoices that you might have, the total cost for your Azure billing account, a brief summary of your costs per month, a running breakdown of all of your kind of accumulated costs through the month, a breakdown by service, and any kind of billing alerts that you might have. Now, this is all pretty standard stuff, but again, it's good to cover the basics before we move on. Now, with that all said, we're going to work our way down the left-hand side a little bit. I'll skip over the really boring parts and we'll just look at all the kind of more interesting tools. So let's have a quick look at cost analysis to begin with. Now, what you see here is what many will be familiar with. This is the default view out of the box. I've done absolutely nothing with it, and you'll see something vaguely similar to this if you go to it in your own portal. It provides insight into how much you're spending across different services, subscriptions, resource groups, and pretty much any other possible metric you can think of, including tags, which I'll cover a little bit later on, but if you're not familiar with them, look up tags, make as much use of them as you can. They will make everything simpler. Now, you can easily change what metric you're grouping by simply using the Group By tab at the top right. And there's a few key features here that I'll mention as well. We've got the filters at the top, so basically you can add a load of kind of different filters in to limit what you're seeing. You've got the time frames so that you can obviously go back and you can actually forecast forward, which, although not the most accurate, is, I find, really quite a useful basic guide. And just a short tip before I jump ahead, you can click on almost any element of any of these different graphs, including the kind of pie chart at the bottom here. Let's actually see if I can, there we go, got a nice little fancy pointer. So you can click on any of these things and it will actually filter everything else you see on this dashboard down to that one element, which really allows you to quite quickly kind of dive into those costs and see where or why you might have certain costs that you might not understand. So let's skip ahead to a view that I've created ahead of this call. Now, this took me probably 15 seconds to go from where I was to this view, basically that I'd created before this call. It's nothing too complex, but it is something that's actually quite useful for me, and it's something that I always come back to. So we can see that I've set this to show the last 6 months of costs for one of my personal Azure subscriptions. I've changed the chart type up here from accumulated to a stacked column because it just gives me a much better view of what I'm trying to look for. And you can see at a glance here exactly which types of resources are probably worth me focusing my time on for cost optimization. Because you can see here, most of my costs come from this or these Azure SQL databases. So it would be worth my time to try and look at optimizing that rather than wasting my time on something like my Redis cache, which, it's only costing me about £60 a month. And yeah, okay, even if I were to save half of that, I'm still not really making my costs back, even just from my time. So it's a good way to try and analyze, where should I best spend my time? That's kind of what this is used for by me, at least. So you can see here, basically, there's a few different things you can change. One thing I've not yet mentioned is that by default, all of these views will show actual cost. Now, what I mean by that is that is the cost incurred by just the resource itself. Ideally, I find it's actually beneficial to change this to what's called amortized cost. Now, the reason for that is that means that all of these costs that you're seeing will actually include things like your reservations, for example, which once you've started to go down that path of optimizing your costs, you will hopefully be using reservations all over the place, and actual cost views might start to not quite show you what you might be expecting to see cost-wise. Now, there is quite a long list of views that are actually built in here. Now, I've completely failed to take a screenshot of this, but one of them is actually going to cover reservations, which I'll show you. Oh, I tell a lie, I did indeed. So what you can do is you can actually go into what's called these smart views, and these are quite cool actually. Basically, they will allow you to compare all of your current kind of monthly costs with a previous period, and it'll even account for things like differing month lengths to give you an accurate cost of whether an accurate view of whether your costs are growing or decreasing. Now, one of the other views here is the reservations cost, the reservations view, sorry. Now, this is something that is really quite useful for seeing, well, first of all, are the reservations that you've put in place actually getting used? Because obviously, if you've committed to using a certain set of resources, you want to make sure that you're getting your value out of that commitment. There's no point having a reservation in place if you're not getting that back, basically, because that's the entire purpose behind it. So you can quite quickly filter these kind of views to show you an organized set of all of your reservations and which might not be being used. So, I happen to know it's worth it in this case, but you can see right at a glance, there's one here that's it's costing me about £429 and about £72 of that's not being used, which means that if I'm not getting a higher saving than that, it makes sense to just basically close that off, get a refund for it, and move on with my day, basically. So let's move on a little bit here. So that was the cost analysis view. And as I said, that's really great. Set up a load of views, share them with your colleagues and things. And just that in itself will give you a much better understanding of your Azure costs. Now, I've moved on to the cost alerts here. There are two different types of alerting that's built into Azure. One of them is the cost anomaly alerting, which I'll show you here. And the other, which I'll show you in a moment, is your reservation utilization, which basically is an automated way of notifying you if you're not actually using your reservations to their full capacity. So it's a way of avoiding having to ever look at that view I just showed you before. As I say, we're trying to work a little bit smarter here, not harder. The less I can look at this kind of thing, the better, realistically. Now, I mentioned anomaly cost reporting. Now, this is really quite smart. What this will allow you to do is to handle that sort of situation that I started by describing earlier in the call, where, you might have a developer or even you yourself have deployed a resource and either it sat around longer than planned or you set it to, I don't know, the wrong size, something like that, and it's costing a lot more than you might have anticipated. Now, historically, what quite often might happen is you wouldn't catch that until the end of the month. And at that point, you've potentially paid a lot more than you would expect. Now, anomaly cost reporting sorts that out for you because within potentially even the first day, you can have set this up so that you will receive a notification if your costs have unexpectedly spiked, or alternatively, if your costs have unexpectedly dropped. And basically, this will look something like this here. So this is an actual example email that I was sent. Now, this was, in this case, triggered by me moving some resources around, and there was a little bit of downtime, which meant that basically those resources weren't in use during that migration. So I happen to know that this was a perfectly valid use case. But you can imagine that if you've got potentially hundreds of different people doing deployments, you've got development environments and the likes, a lot can occur and it's almost impossible for you to keep track of it all. And that's kind of what this can do for you, which is really quite cool. So the other type of alerting that I mentioned is the reservation utilization. Now, in a well-managed Azure environment, you will ideally have a large number of reservations because they're a surefire way to save significant costs in Azure. Now, I will cover exactly what they are a little bit later in the call. Just take it at face value that basically they're well worth looking into to save money, and I'll cover how you can go about that later on. But for now, let's just cover the actual alerting side of things. So when you've got this big list of reservations, again, you can just review them monthly if you want to, but it's kind of a little bit of a waste of your time. And although it's still worth doing, if we could have an automated way to just tell you, look, these reservations aren't actually being used, then obviously that's ideal. And that's exactly what this system does for you. So basically, again, I can easily set up a custom alert rule. I can set it so that it will go to a list of recipients. That might be just me, or it might be me in finance or management, etc. And we can set up these kind of alert rules at all sorts of different kind of billing profile levels and things. And again, it just kind of works. So here's a quick example. Again, this one I've actually stolen from the Microsoft Learn resource, I think it was, just because of lack of time, and I don't have any reservations that are underutilized in this case. But you can see here again that it gives you a very quick way to basically see where you might be having issues with what you've set up in Azure. So skipping ahead a little bit, let's now look at budgets. So as I said earlier, these are not the most interesting of things, but they are a brilliant tool. Now, it's important to note that budgets are not an enforcement tool. They are a reporting tool. Now, what I mean by that is that You can set up these budgets and they will alert you when you're either forecasted or have hit certain limits that you've set, but they will not stop you incurring costs. So if you do create something and you set a budget for, say, £100 and that resource hits £100, it's going to just keep ticking along. So that's just something to be aware of. So we can skip through here and see that creating budgets really, really quite simple. So basically, if I go back here, you go to budgets, click add, and then we're brought to this kind of setup / wizard thing that you see all over Azure, where it'll walk you through the setup. So first of all, we set the scope, which can be your different kind of resource groups, things like that. Pardon me. You can set filters, so we can limit this to, for example, SQL servers, and we could then limit it based on tags and various other things. One quite interesting use case that I've seen is setting a specified owner using tags on your various different resources, and then setting budgets based on those kind of owners or departments, teams, you know, that kind of thing. And as I mentioned, this becomes really quite useful when you teach your colleagues how to do this. You know, the power from this doesn't come from you enforcing this kind of thing on your company ideally. It comes from telling or teaching your company and your colleagues that these tools are available. They can use them, and hopefully it incentivizes them to start taking ownership of costs rather than, you know, us kind of admins and the likes being seen to just trying to force things on departments, which in my experience, yes, okay, it can work, but it doesn't lead to a particularly positive interaction. Ideally, you want to work with your departments and teams rather than against them. So if we skip through here, we can see that basically I've set it up for SQL servers. We get to the next page and it's going to ask me for alert conditions and what recipients to send it to. So again, I've gone ahead, set up a few, ignore the specific values because they're a little bit nonsense, but it's a good example at least. So we can set budgets for the actual, and that will be if our cost reaches exactly $300 in this case, it will send an alert to me. We can set them so that they are forecasted as well. So at the start of the month, if somebody creates a resource and it's going to tip us over that edge, that will notify me as soon as Azure forecasts that cost will be breached at some point in the future. And we can also just set multiple rules. So I can have different triggers where, you know, I've got a budget set to 80%, for example, or even 100% of a lower value. It will notify someone. Then I can have a secondary budget at a slightly higher limit, and that will notify somebody higher up in your chain, you know, that kind of thing. So it's not massively customizable, but you can use the system in quite a few different ways to kind of handle your costs basically through the month or the quarter, that kind of thing. So it's, again, not the most interesting feature necessarily, but it is really quite useful. You can see there, that was the new one I created, and a little while, in about an hour or two, this would show the current progress through the month to hitting that budget. Yeah, of course, I can send this slide afterwards. That's not a problem at all. So moving on a little bit again here, we've got the advisor recommendations portal. Now, this is also its own entire thing. Again, when you're in Azure, you can actually search advisor. It will bring you to a dedicated page where you will see all of these. Now, advisor is brilliant. It's not AI, but it's kind of it's an assistant of sorts. And basically the use of this is that it will look through your entire environment. It will find any potential cost savings, and potential is the important word here, and I'll get to why in a minute. And it will basically list all of these out for you in a lovely little format here, where basically it will go, okay, well, in this case, we've got multiple Cosmos databases, and Azure will go, well, you're using these, and you could put a reservation on it, and you could potentially save yourself $12,000 over the year. Now, obviously, if that does apply to me, and I know that those Cosmos databases aren't going to disappear within the next year or 3 years, that's effectively free money. It's I'm already using it. Why not use these tools to identify these things and just get the saving? Similarly, we can see here it's actually picked up that I've got some virtual machine skill sets, and it's going to recommend that because they're not seeing much or any usage, why don't I right size that, i.e. reduce the SKU or kind of resource available to it, which would reduce my costs? Or could I just turn them off, which saves 100% of costs, which is obviously even better? And you can have a quick look down this list whilst we're on the slide. I won't cover all of them individually because these will be different depending on your environment, of course. But this list is ever expanding. Even just, I think last week, the Microsoft, I don't actually know which team they're called, but the Microsoft team responsible for this, they actually released yet another update which added yet more potential findings for new types of resources. So this is something that is well worth coming back to. Now, in the same vein as what I've been kind of trying to teach you, I suppose, about using the tools at hand, this is brilliant. But what you can also do is you can actually set up alerts or you can set up recommendation digests. Now, these are really quite cool because, again, you can, rather than having to go into this periodically, set up alerts or digests that basically just a summary of the latest findings and have that sent straight to you when these things happen so that you don't need to keep track of it. You only have to look at it when there's something of value to see, which is a slightly different way of working with this, but it saves you a lot of time and it makes this more scalable. So I'm not going to spend too much more time on this. As I say, go have a look in your own environment. I'm sure you will find some things of interest. All I will say about this is that Azure and Microsoft can never understand the context of your resources. Now, what I mean by that is that take our Cosmos database example here. I happen to know that we're doing a little bit of testing with them and they are liable to disappear within the next month. Now, if I were to just blindly follow this recommendation and implement a reservation, the minimum term on that would be 1 year. So if I were to do that, I'm either going to have a reservation that I'm paying for and there's no resource for it to be used on. So I'm basically committing to wasting money, which is the opposite to what we want. Or I can basically take a refund, in which case I'm going to be eating into my refund allowance for the year, which is also not ideal. So again, evaluate these things properly. Make sure you understand the context around your resources before you implement the recommendations that you find here. But it's a brilliant tool for kind of getting started on your cost saving journey. So let's skip ahead a little bit. Now, I promised I would go over what reservations actually are, and again, they're actually in the cost management and billing portal nowadays. You can find links to them in a few other places. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're all starting to lead back here. But traditionally, that was also its own kind of portal page. So once you're past the stage of just turning things off and ensuring that your resources are kind of correctly spec'd, the next question very much becomes, how can we save money on what's left? We are actually using all this, but we still want to try and pay a little bit less. And reservations tend to be the answer to that question. Now, they allow you to commit to using a specific type of resource, such as a virtual machine, for example, at a specific size or SKU, and in a specific location, so say UK South. Now, for almost all resources, you will be committing to using that resource for up between 1 to 3 years, or sorry, on a 1 or 3 year period. And in return, Microsoft will normally give you a discount on those resources, or they always will. And that discount can range somewhere between about 20 to 40%, I believe, for a single year commitment. And it can go up to 72% for a 3 year commitment. Now, that can obviously have a very significant impact on your Azure costs. And it's well worth trying to get that kind of properly dialed in to evaluate your entire environment and to make sure that you've got reservations in place. So let's have a very quick look at setting up a new reservation and kind of identifying what Microsoft recommend, because they actually do quite a good job of telling you what reservations you should have. It's not just entirely left to us to identify that. So let's just cover what I did here. So basically, you go to this portal, you click add at the top left, similar to pretty much everything else in Azure, and you're going to get brought to this purchase reservations page. Now, as you can see here, you can actually implement reservations on a whole suite of different types of resources. You know, we've got virtual machines, which everybody likes. We've got Azure Blob Storage for those of you that uses, well, a lot of storage. we've got databases, and basically just a whole suite of different things. These tend to be all your most kind of common resources that use any sort of compute, basically. Now, let's take a quick look at the virtual machines for now. So I click that. This brings up a new little pane to our right-hand side. And by default, what this is actually going to show you is the recommended tab. Now, I mentioned that Microsoft are quite good at telling you what reservations that you need, and this is exactly what I mean by that. You know, I don't have to go and identify a single kind of virtual machine sitting somewhere, see whether I should implement a reservation and things. It's going to basically tell me that it thinks that I should do these or purchase these reservations based on my historical usage. Now, similar to Advisor, be careful with this. It will obviously tell you that you need, in this case, 4 virtual machines at this size, in this region, etc. And yes, okay, we'll save some money potentially, but if they're going to get deleted next week, again, I run into the same issue of, well, now I'm paying for something that I'm not even using, which is less than ideal. Now, we can see here, I've basically selected, in this case, one of our kind of development subscriptions, and it's recommending to me that I purchase a standard D2S V5 virtual machine. And it's actually recommending, based on our usage, that we reserve 4 of them. Now, assuming that we plan to actually use them for the next 3 years, i.e., we expect that usage to grow rather than to shrink or to disappear, Microsoft will actually offer us a reduced price of around $34 per virtual machine, which is about a 59% saving, as it says here, compared to the normal cost for just running that with no reservation at all. So by implementing this one single reservation, we'd be looking at around a $49 cost saving per virtual machine, which is about $197 per month for the 4 VMs that we're using. Or if you want to look at that from an annual perspective, right there for just clicking, I think it's about 3, maybe 4 buttons, you're actually looking at saving about $2,369 for the year. So you can see how properly utilizing reservations can very quickly make your finance department quite happy, and hopefully your managers, because obviously making your manager happy is always a plus too. So again, be sure to check this out. I would actually recommend, even if you're not too sure whether you need any of these, just look through all the different categories, see what it kind of recommends, get a feel for it, and then, you know, trust but verify that you do actually want them basically and that they are of value to you. So let's move on to savings plans. Now, reservations are great for when you've got a known workload in a known location, and you know it's not going to change too much because you're committing to quite a specific resource at a specific level. Now, savings plans are a similar concept. So you're committing to using a certain level of resource for either 1 or 3 years. Where it differs significantly, however, is that at no point do you select what resource it's applied to. You're actually just committing to using a certain amount of compute resource per hour for the period that you're basically committing to. So if I skip through, oops, sorry, something a bit weird. Seem to have lost it 2 moments, sorry. Let me just have a quick look at my presentation. Apologies, I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment and then I will represent. Let's just skip through all of this. Apologies for this, got to love it when PowerPoint does something funky. Okay, perfect, we're back to where we were. So, as I mentioned, in savings plans, you're not committing to a specific resource, you're committing to utilizing a specific amount of compute resource, and that is against all of your resources, not just, say, a virtual machine or a database or something like that. Now, again, if I click add, that will take me to this add a plan kind of view. Now, there's not an awful lot it's actually going to ask me here because, again, this is more of a kind of global resource thing. I'm not going to be specifying individual resources. What I do is I specify a billing subscription. In this case, I'm using my kind of dev test one again, and it's going to ask me to apply it to any eligible resource. Let's get my little pen out again. And by default, that's going to set it to shared across the subscription's entire billing scope, which you might want to do. Personally, I prefer to limit these sort of things to individual subscriptions just because it makes it a little bit more obvious where your costs are, if that makes sense. Rather than just having a high level item that's savings plans, I kind of want to see that within individual subscriptions. And that's why I've chose that in this case. And you can see here, I can select a 1 or 3 year term, and that is basically how long you commit to using that level of resource. And then we get to the most important field here of all, which is the hourly commitment in US dollars. Now, this always strikes me as quite a nebulous thing. You know, it's not necessarily easy for us to figure out what we're using hourly on compute because how do you really even quantify what that is? Now, luckily, Microsoft have done something quite smart here, and as soon as you click that field, you're actually going to get something like this that suddenly appears. And what this is going to do is it will, first of all, it will recommend what it suggests as the default option that you should select. Now, in this case, I can see that because I've selected, I think it was a 1 year period, these cost savings are a little bit lower, but this will cover, 90.39% of all of my compute usage. And that's going to be compute usage that is not already covered by a reservation. So I think I might have mentioned this, but this is something that you want to do once you're happy that everything that you can is already reserved. You know, this is going to be your kind of catch-all for your differing levels of needs, basically. So say I wanted to go for the default, I'm going to say roughly 16.48 odd percent of it. If I wanted to be slightly more kind of conservative or less conservative, I can select some of these other options, and that's going to obviously change my potential savings. Sorry, Pradeep, you've got your hand up. Can I help you?
Yeah, just a quick one here.
Hmm.
How, like, obviously there's a bit of it's a bit confusing between this reservation plan versus the savings plan. Um,
Yes.
so when planning this cost optimization, does it make sense to first, for instance, if it is a completely new subscriptions or the resources that's being put into place, how would you suggest that? So should it be a savings plans that needs to be planned first or the reservation first? I mean, yeah, just
So I would 100% in all cases look at reservations first. Now, the reason I say that is that reservations will almost always give you greater savings, but the disadvantage to that is that they're very specifically aimed. So what I mean by that is that to create a reservation at all, you have to know what type of resource it is. You have to know what size of resource that is. You've got to know what location that resource will be in and that kind of thing. And that can be somewhat difficult. But personally, I would prefer to wait a little while, figure all that out, implement a reservation if I can, rather than using a savings plan for it. Because as I say, savings plans, you're going to get a little bit less savings. They're more designed as a catch-all, not as the default. Because the problem here is that if you start by implementing a savings plan, and you've got no reservations across your entire environment, these recommendations that you see here are going to be significantly higher because what they're going to be recommending is not based off of what you've not yet covered. It's going to be based off of everything. And saving, what is it, like 16% of all of your costs, yeah, okay, it's brilliant. But if you were to spend the time to implement a reservation, even just on a 1 year, you're probably going to save about 36% on average at least for, virtual machines and the likes. And if you extend that to 3 years, you might save up to, I think, what was it, 75% or something of your virtual machine costs. Whereas even at 3 years on a savings plan, I think it's closer to about 30%. So yeah, these are great as a bit of a catch-all, but don't start here. Start in reservations. And before you even touch reservations, make sure that what you're using is actually needed. You're going to save 100% of your costs if you turn a virtual machine off. It's simple as that, really. So
Of course, yeah,
it's a bit of a scaled system.
All right. Thanks, Son.
No bother at all. So you'll be happy to know I don't have too much longer to go. I know it's a Friday, it is getting a little bit later. So yeah, the takeaway from this is basically savings plans. They are great. They're kind of one of the last things you should be doing ideally, because you want these recommendations to be as accurate as possible to the bits that for whatever reason you cannot reserve. Finally, billing frequency. I don't think we need to cover that too much, but basically you can pay them monthly or all up front, and you can set them to auto renew or to not. Basically, that will be entirely up to your own preferences. So at this point, I've kind of reached the end of my slides. Now, there are a lot of other areas in the cost management portal, but those are the places I would recommend that you start and get very familiar with them. Just by becoming proficient at those areas or those tools, you'll significantly simplify your job. You will make it much easier to identify where your cost savings are, and potentially you will just save a significant amount just by implementing things like reservations and the likes. So yeah, hopefully you come away with this with a few things that you can look at, something practical. And yeah, basically that's very much the end of my slides. So I don't think we've got any spare time in this case, but I'll still do the shameless plug. I write for something called the Sysadmin Central blog. It's a personal project. I write about all things Azure. My latest post is here, as you can see, how to reduce your Azure SQL database costs. And if you're particularly interested in this kind of thing, be sure to check it out. Come and follow me, add me on LinkedIn or whatever if you just want to chat. I'm always happy to do something along those lines. Otherwise, that is the end of my slide, and thank you very much for having me. Sorry, Pradeep, I think you're...
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, so finally, we're at the end of this meetup today. Thanks, Son, for your interesting presentation. It was a really nice one. Very, lot of items for as takeaway on your presentation, of course. So with this, before we end, what's next in the community? Basically, we're hoping that we will have a November meetup live from Crowley, London area, somewhere. It could be possibly a hybrid event. There's a meetup page already set up. Please do join if you haven't joined already. But then there's a speaking opportunity as well. If you would like to speak around Azure infrastructure, security, data and AI, or apps, innovative apps that you would like to speak about, you're most welcome to speak of them. So with this, thank you so much, everyone, once again for joining this meetup today, and hope to see you soon again. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, Pradeep.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers. Bye. Good night.